After successful osseointegration of the Straumann standard implant regular neck in the region of tooth 1-2, the SCS healing cap is removed and the interior of the implant is thoroughly cleaned. Then the impression cap is placed on the implant shoulder using the integrated positioning screw. The impression is taken using a custom impression tray with suitable perforation and an elastomeric impression material. The positioning screw is exposed before the impression material has completely hardened. The screw is then loosened completely to remove the impression. This is the completed impression with the impression coping. The implant is now once again closed using the SCS healing cap. At the dental laboratory, the corresponding implant analog is repositioned in the impression and held in place by the integrated positioning screw. A gingival mask should always be used to achieve an optimal cervical crown contour. The working model is created as usual using dental stone. This is the completed working model with the implant analog and the gingival mask. After checking the clinical situation on an articulator, the abutment can now be selected. For this purpose, a special prosthetic planning kit is available to dental technicians to facilitate the choice of the correct components and to keep inventory levels at a minimum. This planning kit includes plastic try-in abutments for crowns and bridges that can be placed on the implant analogs to verify their heights and axial inclinations. The synOcta-1.5 screw-retained abutment used here offers considerable advantages, especially where vertical space is limited and a transocclusal screw-retained restoration is to be inserted. The synOcta-1.5 screw-retained abutment, which is only 1.5 mm high, is placed inside the implant analog and aligned with the internal octagon. The base screw is not tightened until the abutment is properly seated. The synOcta gold coping with an integrated modeling aid has been selected. It's put in place and fixated using an SCS occlusal guide screw. Depending on the actual situation, the modeling aid and positioning screw may have to be trimmed to match the height of the occlusal plane. Once the occlusal height has been reconfirmed, the crown framework is modeled in wax using anatomical principles. Note that wax must cover the gold coping wherever ceramic will be fired onto it at a later stage. The finished wax model is now invested and the crown framework is cast. This is followed by oxide firing, wash firing and core firing. The ceramic materials are applied to the framework following anatomical principles. After the main firing, the procedure is completed with a correction firing and a glaze firing. The finalized crown is checked on the articulator where any final adjustments are made and delivered to the dentist with the abutment on the mastercast. The healing cap is removed and the interior of the implant is thoroughly cleaned. The RN synOcta 1.5 screw-retained abutment is placed inside the internal octagon without cement. The base screw is tightened by using the SCS screwdriver with the ratchet and torque control device. The recommended torque for screwing down the abutment is 35 Newton centimeters. The finished crown is placed on the abutment and fixated using the occlusal screw. The torque should be 15 Newton centimeters. Finally, the screw access hole can be sealed using a light curing composite resin. The follow-up radiograph shows the correct alignment of the implant axis and the absence of gaps at the crown margin implant shoulder interface. The RN synOcta 1.5 screw-retained abutment used here, with its minimal vertical height, offers considerable advantages, especially where vertical space is limited.